Silas pressed the trigger and felt the pulse in his teeth. The Ashfall arena had been carved from a dead mining platform in the Korath sector, 17 hours of silence before the alarms began. They had locked a human in with a killer. By dawn, either the beast would be dead or he would. Silas was betting on something the house didn't understand. The collar around the Drock's neck was the same model they'd used on him in Holding, except the Drock's had scratches in the metal, deep ones, as if something had been trying to tear it off for years. Gas hissed from vents in the arena floor, yellow, thick smelling of sulfur and burned copper. Silas's lungs burned. He couldn't see the observation deck 50 feet above, but he knew they were up there. The crime lords, the bet takers. The ones who had paid to watch a man die. Ash crouched, 6 amber eyes, 3 on each side of that armored skull, fixed on Silas. The bioluminescence in the creature's throat flickered from blue to violet. Confusion, maybe, or warning. Silas climbed onto the Drock's back. The plates were warm, hot actually, like touching an engine housing that had been running for days. He wrapped his arms around the base of the neck, fingers finding grooves between obsidian scales. His left hand, missing the tip of its index finger, pressed into a ridge. The old injury ached. Ash moved. Claws screeched against iron. The sound tore through the arena, metal on metal, a frequency that made Silas's jaw clench. The Drock climbed, not ran, climbed. The arena wall was sheer, 50 feet of riveted iron with no handholds, and Ash found purchase where none existed. Each strike of claw against plate sent sparks showering down into the gas. 30 feet, 40. The observation deck window loomed. Reinforced glass 2 inches thick, framed in steel. Silas saw faces now. Pale, wide mouths open. One of them was reaching for something. A weapon, maybe, or a drink. Ash's tail, bone-ridged and heavy as a structural beam, whipped forward. The glass didn't shatter, it exploded. A crystalline cascade, high and sharp, rained across the deck. Silas squeezed his eyes shut, felt the Drock surge through the frame, felt them tumble across polished flooring. His shoulder hit something hard. His knee struck a table edge. When he opened his eyes, the observation deck was chaos. Crime lords scattered. A chair overturned, spilling cards and credit chips. Someone screamed, high and thin, not a sound Silas had expected from people who sold death for entertainment. One figure didn't run. Proctor Vane, arena operations director, prosthetic red eye whirring as it calculated odds that no longer mattered. His hand went inside his coat. Ash moved between Silas and the weapon, not attacking, not threatening, just placing himself there, 600 pounds of obsidian plates and bone, a wall that breathed. The part that still keeps me up at night? That comes later. But first, you need to understand what 17 hours of iron can teach a man about monsters. The data plate in Silas's pocket had been cool once. 17 hours earlier, in the holding cell beneath Ironhold Station, it had been cool against his thigh. Now it was warm, body heat probably, or maybe the thing was cursed. It held his death sentence, 12 kilos of medical supplies he had never touched, signed with his own hand. Except his signature had been copied from a fuel receipt. Someone had needed a fall guy with a clean record, and Silas Venn, cargo hauler, had the cleanest record in the Korath sector. He'd been running freight between fringe stations for 11 years. The Starling, his runner, was probably still an impound. He hoped they hadn't stripped her engine. She was a good ship. Old but good, like most things he owned. The holding cell smelled of recycled coolant and old fear. Silas knelt on the floor, hands bound behind him, listening to 2 guards discuss his execution as if choosing between protein rations. 300 to 1 against his survival, the younger one said. Human, maybe. Silas didn't look up. The house always wins. Not always. The second voice was older, dry, scaled. Silas lifted his head. A Korath guard stood in the doorway, his scales dulled with age, eyes dimmed to a cloudy amber. He wore the station's security uniform badly, like a costume he'd never wanted. In one hand he held a datapad, in the other nothing. The Korath's upper lip curled as he looked at the younger guard. "Leave us," the Korath said. But the proctor said, "Debt exists between us, you will leave." The younger guard hesitated, then walked out. The Korath watched him go, his tail motionless behind him. Korath tails moved when they were agitated. This one was still. "They did not try you," the Korath said to Silas. "They sold you to the Crimson Circuit, the Blood Merchants." He said the words without emphasis, but his claws extended slightly from their sheaths. "A tell. You have 17 hours, survive until dawn in the Ashfall Arena and the Syndicate's contract is fulfilled. You walk free. That is the law they have written." "Free to what?" Silas asked. His voice came out rough. He hadn't spoken in 6 hours. The Korath tilted his head, a gesture of consideration or maybe respect. Free to seek debt repayment from those who forged your name. He held up the data pad, on its screen a manifest. 12 kilos of medical supplies. Silas's signature, perfect, copied from a fuel receipt he'd signed at Station Vex 3 months ago. Someone needed a fall guy, the Korath said. Your record was too clean, it made you valuable. Silas said nothing. He was thinking about the Starling's engine, about the documentary he'd been watching on deep space cephalopods, about how the floor of the cell was exactly the same temperature as the floor of his cargo hold. Cold, permanent. The arena opponent, the Korath said. You should know it is not what they tell you. What do they tell me? That it is a beast, dangerous fauna, a drock from the Death World classification, 17 kills in the arena. The Korath's eyes narrowed. What they do not tell you is that twice it refused to kill. And twice the collar punished it until the screaming stopped. He turned and left, the cell door sealed with a hiss. Silas sat alone. After a while he rubbed the stump of his missing fingertip against his thumb in slow circles. It was an old habit, nervous, mechanical. He did it when he was calculating fuel loads or docking trajectories or trying not to think about how the next 17 hours might end. They drugged him for transport. He remembered the needle cold against his neck. Then nothing. Waking was worse. The floor was iron. That was the first thing Silas noticed. Cold, hard, permanent. It sucked the heat from his palms through the thin fabric of his prison uniform. He was on his knees. The arena stretched around him, a bowl of riveted metal plates, 60 feet across, 50 feet deep. Above, the observation deck curved like a half-closed eye. He couldn't see the spectators yet, but he could hear them. A low murmur, the sound of money changing hands. His hands were free. The bindings had been cut. In his pocket, the scorched data plate still warm. A voice crackled from overhead speakers. Gleeful. Human, probably, though the accent was synthetic, processed through translation software. Welcome to the Ashfall Arena, gentle beings. Tonight's entertainment features a rare treat. A human cargo hauler, no combat training, no criminal record, clean as starlight. Against our reigning champion, the Drock of the Obsidian Pits. 17 victories, 0 mercy. Current odds, 300 to 1 against the human's survival. Place your final wagers. Silas stood. His knees popped. He was 43 years old, in decent shape from loading cargo, but no fighter. He'd never thrown a punch in his life. He'd once broken up a bar fight on Station Vex by offering everyone free protein rations. It had worked because the rations were expensive and the fight was boring. He looked across the arena. The Drock emerged from a shadowed archway opposite him, 8 feet tall at the shoulder. Obsidian plates layered like armor over muscle that moved with a fluidity that shouldn't have been possible for something so heavy. 6 amber eyes, 3 per side, blinked in sequence. A tail, bone-ridged and longer than Silas was tall, dragged behind it, leaving faint scratches in the iron floor. The collar around its neck was the same model from holding. Scratches in the metal, deep ones. The Drock stopped 20 feet away, its head tilted. The bioluminescence in its throat flickered blue, then violet. Silas thought of the documentary he'd watched. Deep space cephalopods. They communicated through color change, pattern, pulse, not language as humans understood it, something older, something that didn't require translation. He thought of the Korath guard's words. Twice it refused to kill. The overhead speaker crackled again. Let the spectacle begin. The crowd murmured louder, expectant, hungry. Silas looked at the Drock looked at Silas. Then Silas walked to the center of the arena, slowly announcing each movement. He sat cross-legged on the iron floor. He folded his hands in his lap. He looked up at the observation deck, though he couldn't see faces through the tinted glass. I am not going to run, he said. His voice didn't carry far, but he wasn't speaking to the crowd. I am not going to fight. I am going to make this boring for them. The Drock's head tilted further, all 6 eyes fixed on him. A full minute passed. The crowd's murmur shifted, confusion, disappointment. The Drock sat down. 15 feet away, legs folded beneath it, tail curled around its feet. The bioluminescence in its throat settled to a steady amber. The speaker crackled. What is this? Place your wagers, the match is. Suboptimal, Silas muttered to himself. He rubbed his fingertip stump. This is suboptimal. An hour passed, maybe 2. Time moved strangely in the arena. No clocks, just the iron floor and the distant hum of climate control and the occasional whisper from the observation deck. The Drock had not moved. Its 6 eyes remained fixed on Silas, but not with predatory focus, with something else. Observation, maybe, or calculation. Silas was thirsty. His mouth felt packed with dust. There was a water dispenser built into the arena wall, a crude fountain for prisoners who were expected to die quickly enough that dehydration wouldn't matter. He stood slowly, keeping his movements visible, and walked toward it. The Drak watched. He filled the plastic cup that hung from a chain. The water tasted of iron and disinfectant. He drank half. Then, moving slowly, he filled a second cup and set it on the floor between himself and the Drak. He returned to his sitting position. The Drak looked at the water, looked at Sila's. The bioluminescence in its throat shifted from amber to a pale green. Then it rose, moved to the cup, and drank. The sound was surprisingly delicate, a soft lapping, almost feline. When it finished, it returned to its position. Closer now, 10 feet instead of 15. Silas felt something in his chest, not hope exactly. Hope was dangerous, more like recognition. The Drak was not attacking, the Drak was choosing. He reached into his pocket. The scorched data plate was still there. He didn't look at it. He just held it, feeling its warmth, its weight. Evidence of a crime he hadn't committed. Maybe evidence of something else, too. The overhead speaker crackled. Proctor Vane's voice this time, dry and amused. Interesting strategy, Hauler, but the House has patience. The House always wins. Silas didn't respond. He was watching the Drak's throat. The bioluminescence had shifted again. Not blue, not violet, not amber, not green. Something new. A slow pulse like a heartbeat visible through skin. He felt it before he heard it. A vibration in his sternum, low and rhythmic. Subsonic. Too low for human ears, but his body registered it. Pressure in his chest. A frequency that made his missing fingertip tingle. The Drak was making a sound. Silas didn't know what it meant, but he knew with a certainty that surprised him that it wasn't a threat. They shocked them both for an action. It came without warning. The collars activated simultaneously, a synchronized pulse that locked every muscle in Silas's body. He hit the iron floor hard, jaw cracking against metal, taste of copper flooding his mouth. The pain was white, absolute, a voltage designed to punish, not kill, not yet. Beside him, the Drak roared. Not a scream, a roar, subsonic, but loud enough now to rattle the arena walls. The iron plates hummed in sympathy. The observation deck lights flickered. The Drak wasn't roaring at Silas. It was roaring at the ceiling, at the cameras, at the invisible hands that had pressed the button. The shock ended. Silas lay on his back, gasping, staring up at the dark curve of the observation deck. His jaw throbbed. He tasted blood where he'd bitten his cheek. He turned his head. The Drak was still roaring, but the sound had shifted. Lower, directed now, not at the ceiling, at the collar around its own neck. The creature's claws raked at the metal, finding the same scratches that had been there for years, deepening them. Silas sat up slowly. His muscles twitched with aftershocks. He looked at the Drak's scales. Up close now, he could see what the arena lighting had hidden. Scars, not battle scars, patterned marks, each one matching the shape of the collar's contact points. Burn scars, electrical burns. 17 kills, the Korath had said. 17 scars from collar shocks. Silas counted them. 12 on the visible plates. Maybe more beneath. 12 burns for 12 refusals. The Drak hadn't killed 17 opponents. It had been punished 17 times for not killing. For showing mercy or hesitation or whatever passed for conscience in a species the galaxy called monster. The Drak stopped roaring. Its 6 eyes found Silas. The bioluminescence in its throat was red now, a color Silas hadn't seen before. Twice, Silas whispered. His voice was rough. The guard said twice, but it's more than twice, isn't it? The Drak didn't answer. It didn't need to. It sat back on its haunches, tail curling around its feet, and looked at Silas with 6 amber eyes that held something too complex for the word intelligence. Something closer to exhaustion. Silas adjusted his own collar. It was too tight, pinching the skin where his neck met his shoulder. A mundane discomfort. He'd had worse from the starling's harness straps. He looked at the Drak looked at him. Shared enemy then, not each other. Another hour, maybe 3. The overhead speaker had gone silent. Proctor Vane, Silas assumed, was waiting for them to die of boredom or desperation. The crowd had thinned, judging by the reduced murmur from above. Silas was cold. The arena's climate control kept the temperature at a level designed to keep spectators comfortable and prisoners miserable. His prison uniform was thin. The iron floor leached heat from his body. The Drak, he noticed, radiated warmth, not just from the plates. From vents along its sides, openings between the obsidian armor where softer tissue pulsed with heat. Like a furnace. Like an engine that never cooled. Silas moved closer. Slowly, announcing each shift of weight, each placement of hand and knee. The Drak watched but didn't tense. When Silas was 5 feet away, he stopped. He sat cross-legged again, He didn't touch the creature, he just let the warmth reach him. The Drak's tail shifted, not a threat, a repositioning. The bone-ridged tip settled on the iron floor between them, a barrier that was also an invitation. Silas slept. He didn't mean to. Exhaustion took him like a docking clamp, sudden and absolute. He dreamed of the Starling's engine room, the familiar hum of the fusion core, the smell of ozone and lubricant. He dreamed of loading cargo on Station Vex, the weight of crates in his arms, the simple math of mass and balance. He woke to something dead beside him. A tunnel rat, 3 pounds of gray fur and yellow teeth, neck broken cleanly. The Drak had placed it there while he slept. A gift, or an offering. Or a test. Silas sat up. The creature was watching him from the same position, 10 feet away, 6 eyes unblinking. He picked up the tunnel rat. It was still warm. He'd eaten worse on fringe runs. Protein was protein, but he didn't eat it. He broke it in half, slowly, carefully, and set one portion on the floor between them. Shared, he said, his voice cracked. Not given, not taken, shared. The Drak moved closer. It ate the half Silas had offered, then it waited. Silas ate his half. The meat was stringy, gamey, better than protein paste. He hadn't realized how hungry he was. When they finished, the Drak settled closer. 5 feet now. The warmth from its vents washed over Silas like a blanket. The subsonic rumble returned, that low sternum pressure that wasn't quite sound. Steadier now. Rhythmic. Silas reached into his pocket. He pulled out the scorched data plate. The screen was cracked but functional. He opened a new file. He didn't know the Drak's language. He didn't know if it had a language, but he could record. He could document. He held the data plate toward the Drak. The screen glowed blue in the arena's dim light. The Drak looked at it. The bioluminescence in its throat shifted. A new pattern, slow waves of amber and green pulsing in sequence. Silas pressed record. The subsonic vibration hit the data plate's microphone as a faint buzz. He couldn't hear it properly, but the device registered something. A waveform. A pattern. He didn't know what it meant, but he saved it. Pattern 1. The Drak watched him save it. Then it made the sound again, slightly different. A variation. Silas recorded that too. Pattern 2. They sat together in the Ashfall arena, a cargo hauler and a creature the galaxy called Monster, building a grammar from vibrations and light. 17 hours had become 15. The iron floor was still cold. The observation deck still waited. But something had shifted. Something Silas didn't have a word for yet. He rubbed his missing fingertip. Not nervous anymore, just thinking. The data plate in his hand held 12 kilos of lies that had condemned him. Now it held 2 patterns of trust between species the Council refused to acknowledge. That was enough for now. The first drone entered through the ventilation grate at Silas's shoulder height, rotors screaming, taser prongs sparking blue. Ash moved before Silas could blink. The Drak's tail whipped upward, bone-ridged edge catching the drone mid-flight. Metal crumpled. Rotors shrieked and died. The drone hit the iron floor in pieces, sparks crawling across the plates like dying insects. 2 more drones dropped from opposite grates, then 4. The arena's ceiling was a grid of vents, and someone had opened them all. Silas scrambled backward. His shoulder hit the arena wall. Ash positioned himself between Silas and the drones, 6 amber eyes tracking each movement, bioluminescence in his throat flashing red. A warning color, or a war color. The drones attacked in pairs. Taser prongs extended, voltage crackling. They weren't trying to kill, they were trying to herd. To force Ash into combat, to make him perform the violence the crowd had paid for. Ash didn't perform, he destroyed. A claw strike split one drone down its center axis. A shoulder charge sent another spinning into the wall, where it exploded in a shower of ceramic and wire. But there were too many. 8 now, 12. They swarmed like hornets, taser prongs finding gaps in the obsidian plates. One struck Ash's flank. The Drak roared, subsonic, the sound shaking dust from the arena rafters. Another prong caught his neck joint where the plates were thinnest. Ash staggered. For the first time, Silas saw him falter. "Hey," Silas shouted. He didn't have a weapon. He had the scorched data plate in his pocket, a plastic water cup, and 17 hours of accumulated rage. He grabbed a broken drone rotor from the floor, sharp as a knife, and threw it at the nearest machine. It missed, but the drone turned, assessed, decided Silas was a target. It fired. Ash intercepted. The taser prong struck his chest plates, voltage crawling across obsidian in blue veins. The Drak didn't roar this time. He made no sound at all. He simply collapsed, 600 pounds of muscle and armor hitting the iron floor with a sound like a bulkhead ceiling. The drones hovered, assessing. Their programming hadn't accounted for this. They were supposed to force combat between prisoner and beast, not guard the beast from the prisoner. Silas ran to Ash. The Drock's eyes were open but unfocused, pupils dilated to black pits. The bioluminescence in his throat flickered weak, pale, a candle in wind. Burn marks spread across his chest plates where the taser had struck, not surface burns. Deep ones. The smell of scorched obsidian filled the arena, sharp and chemical, like overheated circuitry. Not like this, Silas whispered. He touched Ash's plates. They were cooling. Not after everything. He looked at the drones. They hung in the air, rotors humming, waiting for new instructions. Waiting for Proctor Vane to decide what game came next. Silas reached into his pocket. The data plate was warm in his hand. He opened the recording file. Pattern 1, Pattern 2. The subsonic frequencies he'd captured, the grammar of trust built in hours of silence. He held the device's speaker toward the drones. He pressed play. The sound that emerged was faint, a buzz, a vibration barely audible to human ears, but Ash's throat bioluminescence twitched. The pale flicker strengthened. One amber eye focused. The drones didn't react. They weren't programmed to fear sound. Ash's tail moved, slow, dragging but deliberate. It curled around Silas's leg, pack behavior, protection even now. Silas understood. The drones weren't the enemy. The collars were. The cameras were. The system that turned living beings into spectacle. He looked at the wreckage around them. Broken drones, exposed wiring, circuit boards sparking in the dark. He was a cargo hauler. He understood machines. He understood how to make things work and how to make them stop. He began to build. 3 hours later, Silas held a crude EMP device in his hands. It was ugly. A drone battery wired to a collapsed capacitor, wrapped in torn fabric from his prison uniform. The trigger was a fragment of obsidian plate he'd found on the floor, probably shed from Ash during the fight, sharp enough to complete a circuit. Ash watched him work. The Drock had recovered enough to sit upright, though his movements were slower now. The burn wound on his chest wept a thick fluid that smelled of copper and ozone. Silas had cleaned it as best he could, using water and a strip torn from his sleeve. Ash had let him. Had positioned himself to give Silas access to the wound, then returned to guard posture, tail wrapped around Silas's ankle. They hadn't been shocked again. Proctor Vane was waiting, Silas suspected, letting them think they had won, letting the audience grow restless, then hopeful, then angry. The best spectacles had arcs. Silas checked the EMP's charge indicator. A green light flickered, unstable but functional. He looked up at the observation deck, 50 feet above. Sheer iron wall, no handholds, no ladder, just the ventilation grates, too small for a human, barely large enough for a drone. Ash, he said, the Drock's head turned, all 6 eyes fixed on him. I need to get up there to the deck. Can you climb with me? He didn't know if the Drock understood the words, but he pointed, up, to the glass, to the people who had been watching them for hours. Ash looked up, his throat bioluminescence shifted, amber to green. Then he crouched, forelegs extended, back lowered, an invitation, a platform. Silas climbed on. The plates were warm beneath him, but cooler than before. The burn wound had taken something from Ash. Endurance, maybe, or trust in his own body. Silas wrapped his arms around the neck grooves and pressed his face against obsidian armor. Climb when I say, he whispered. Not before. I need to trigger this first. The pulse will kill the collars, then we go, both of us. Ash rumbled, subsonic. Silas felt it in his ribs, agreement he hoped, or at least not refusal. He looked at the device in his hand, the obsidian trigger. The green light flickered again. Somewhere above, a speaker crackled. Proctor Vane's voice, dry and amused, betting terminology infecting every syllable. The odds have shifted, Hauler. 300 to 1 in favor of your survival. The house is reconsidering its position. Silas didn't answer. He was thinking about the Starling's engine room. About the simple, reliable math of mass and balance, about how some machines were built to break and some were built to endure. He pressed the trigger. The pulse was invisible, but he felt it in his teeth, a vibration that started in the EMP's core and spread outward in a sphere, silent, absolute. It hit the collars first. Silas felt the metal around his neck go dead, its circuits fried, its power source collapsed. The collar unlocked and clattered to the iron floor. Ash's collar released too. The Drock shook his head, the discarded metal ringing against plates. Then the pulse kept going. It hit the arena lights. They flickered and died, plunging the bowl into darkness broken only by Ash's bioluminescence. It hit the cameras. Sparks showered from housings in the ceiling. It hit the overhead speakers, killing Vane's voice mid-sentence. Gas hissed from the vents. Yellow thick, the same sulfur and copper smell from before. But this time the collars were gone. This time they could run. Ash moved. The climb was not like before. Ash was wounded, his left foreleg stiff from the taser burn. Each strike of claw against iron sent a tremor through his body that Silas felt in his spine. But the Drock didn't stop, didn't hesitate. He climbed the sheer wall as if gravity were a suggestion, 50 feet of riveted metal passing in seconds. The observation deck window loomed, reinforced glass, 2 inches thick. Ash's tail whipped forward. The bone-ridged edge struck the center of the frame, cracks spiderwebbed, not enough. Ash struck again. His shoulder, his head, his tail, a relentless battering that Silas felt in his bones. The Drock was roaring, subsonic, the sound shaking the deck's infrastructure. The frame shorted, sparks cascaded. The glass didn't shatter, it exploded. They burst through in a crystalline cascade, tumbling across polished flooring. Silas's shoulder hit something hard. His knee struck a table edge. When his vision cleared, the observation deck was chaos. Crime lords scattered. A chair overturned, spilling cards and credit chips across marble. Someone screamed, high and thin, the sound of money losing its nerve. One figure didn't run. Proctor Vane stood near the shattered window frame, his prosthetic red eye whirring as it tried to calculate odds that no longer existed. His coat's cuff, embroidered with 47 tally marks, fluttered as he reached inside his jacket. Ash moved between Silas and the weapon, not attacking, not threatening, just placing himself there, a wall that breathed, 600 pounds of obsidian and bone and deliberate choice. Silas stood on shaking legs. His lungs burned from the gas. His left hand, missing its fingertip, pressed against his thigh to stop the trembling. He looked at the crime lords, at the betting terminals, at the screens that had shown his death for entertainment. "We are leaving," he announced. His voice was rough. It didn't carry authority. It carried exhaustion. "Both of us. And if anyone tries to stop us, you will have to explain to the galaxy why you were betting on a sentient being's murder." The deck held its breath. Ash's 6 amber eyes swept the room. His tail curled around Silas's leg, not a threat, a statement. The bioluminescence in his throat glowed steady red, wore color, but controlled, waiting. No one moved. Then the door opened. Officer Halden entered like she was arriving late to a meeting she hadn't wanted to attend. Station security uniform, wrinkled. Dark circles under her eyes that spoke of 8 months investigating the Crimson Circuit. She held a tablet in one hand and a service pistol in the other, though the pistol hung loose at her side, unfired. She looked at the shattered window, at Ash standing guard over Silas, at Proctor Vane, frozen with his hand still inside his coat. Then she looked at Silas and her expression was dry satisfaction, understated relief. "The broadcast," she said, "went live to 17,000 betting terminals across 3 systems. She tapped her tablet. 17,000, including one registered to a Galactic Council observer who has been silent for 6 hours. I imagine he's not silent anymore." Silas felt the words land, not just a prison break, a galactic incident. The Council, which had classified Drock as dangerous fauna, which had refused to test for sentience, which had built the architecture of denial that made arenas like this possible. They had been watching. They had seen. "Your deal," Silas said. It wasn't a question. Halden nodded. "Testify against the syndicate. Name names, every warden, every proctor, every guard who took a bribe." She looked at Ash, the Drock's 6 eyes fixed on her, unblinking. "In exchange, every prisoner in Ironhold walks free. You get your ship back. The Starling, yes, she's an impound. Clean record, full registry restoration." She paused, her pistol didn't move. "And the Drock," she said, "registered as your legal partner under provisional sentient status. The Council observer is already drafting the motion. Seems he doesn't want to be the one who ignored evidence of sentience broadcast to 17,000 witnesses." Silas looked at Ash. The Drock's throat bioluminescence had shifted. Red to amber, amber to green, the slow pulse of consideration. "Partner," Silas said. He tried the word. It felt strange. Not wrong, just new. Like learning a language where the grammar hadn't existed yesterday. He reached out slowly. He placed his hand, the one with the missing fingertip, against Ash's snout. The plates were warm. The obsidian was smooth, almost polished, where it wasn't scarred by collar burns. Ash rumbled, subsonic. Silas felt it in his sternum, but this time he recognized the pattern. Pattern 3, contentment, or something close to it. As Halden spoke, Silas noticed Proctor Vane's red prosthetic eye still whirring from the floor where he'd fallen. Still recording. Still transmitting to someone who hadn't been in the room. They named the Drock 3 days later. Silas sat in the Starling's cramped galley, the ship's engines humming beneath him like a familiar heartbeat. The impound lot had been reluctant to release her, but Halden's paperwork was thorough and her patience was not. They'd lifted off Ironhold Station at dawn, Ash curled in the cargo bay because he didn't fit anywhere else. The data plate lay on the table between them, scorched, cracked, but functional. Silas scrolled through the files. Pattern 1, Pattern 2, Pattern 3. 17 more recorded during the climb, during the confrontation, during the long silence while Halden's team processed the crime scene. 47 subsonic patterns now. A vocabulary, not complete but growing. The Korath guard called you a drock, Silas said. He wasn't sure if Ash understood the words, but he spoke anyway. It helped him think. Your species, but that's what they call you. Not what you are. Ash's throat bioluminescence shifted. Amber listening. Silas rubbed his missing fingertip. Not nervous, just thinking. Ash, he said. Short for the sound you make when you're content. Pattern 3. The rumble that doesn't mean anything except you're here and you're warm and nothing is trying to kill us. Ash rumbled. Pattern 3. Confirmation maybe, or acceptance. The data plate recorded it. Pattern 48. They found the Meridian in distress 3 weeks later. A civilian transport, 43 passengers, 12 of them children. Engine failure in the Korath sector, drifting toward a debris field. Standard distress beacon. Standard rescue protocol. Silas brought the Starling alongside. He and Ash crossed through the airlock together. The passengers were clustered in the main cabin, frightened, exhausted, running low on water. A small girl, maybe 6 years old, with dark hair and a stained jumpsuit, saw Ash first. She didn't scream. She tilted her head, the same gesture Ash made when confused. Nice dragon, she said. Her parents tensed. The other adults reached for whatever weapons they had or for children to shield. Ash crouched, slow, deliberate, announcing every movement. He extended one foreleg, the claws retracted, and placed it gently on the floor. Then he lowered his head until his snout was level with the girl's face. His throat bioluminescence shifted. Amber to green, pattern 3, contentment. The girl touched his claw. Her hand was tiny against the obsidian plate. She smiled. The parents relaxed. Not all at once, but gradually as Ash moved through the cabin, as children gathered around him, as the subsonic rumble of pattern 3 filled the space like a lullaby. The Drock who had been classified as dangerous fauna became, in the space of an hour, the children's guardian. He carried the youngest on his back during the transfer to the Starling. He positioned himself between the sleeping children and the airlock, tail curled, 6 eyes watching the dark. Silas watched from the cockpit. The data plate in his pocket held 47 patterns. Soon 48, maybe more. The same data plate that had condemned him now held a grammar of trust between species the Council refused to acknowledge. It was scorched at the edges, cracked down the center, warm from his body heat. It had survived the arena. It would survive whatever came next. He set a course for the nearest Council station. Halden's provisional paperwork needed formalizing. The Meridian's passengers needed medical attention. And somewhere, in the silence between stars, a Council observer was still deciding what to do with evidence he hadn't meant to witness. Silas didn't worry about it. He had learned something in 17 hours of iron. The most radical resistance was patience. The most powerful weapon was consistency. And the most dangerous thing in the galaxy was not a monster. It was a man who had stopped running, sitting, cross-legged on a cold floor, offering water to something the world had taught him to fear. In the cargo bay, Ash's bioluminescent throat glowed steady amber. 12 children slept against his plates, their breathing synchronized with his subsonic rumble. The obsidian armor that had withstood collar shocks and taser burns and 50-foot falls was warm with their weight. Silas touched the data plate in his pocket. He rubbed his missing fingertip against his thumb, not nervous anymore, just here. Ash's tail shifted, the bone-ridged tip settling on the deck beside Silas's boot. A barrier, an invitation, a grammar they were still learning, one vibration at a time. Outside the viewport, stars burned in patterns older than language. Inside, a cargo hauler and a creature the galaxy called Monster kept watch over sleeping children, building something the Council had no words for yet.